Hello, I'm Mathijs Heyligers. I'm a master luthier, a violin maker working in Cremona now for 50 years, and I wish you welcome to this beautiful city, Cremona. This is where the wood actually is seasoning. So this is a very beautiful violin from 1767.
My goodness.
Fantastic instrument which I've been restoring, and now I've been bringing it back to its original state again, so it can play baroque music and not necessarily romantic or modern music. Very often I happen to receive important antique instruments that need work, maybe because they've had some damage for restoration or whatever, but more often it's actually to change the actual musical output of the instrument, the sound of the violin. And very often it happens that antique instruments, like for instance this violin was made in 1767, as the original label says inside. I have to bring it back to the original state again, which means to make it sound like it sounded way back in 1767 for the music that was written in those days. And not much was different actually if we talk about the violin, because it still looked the same. The violin actually hasn't really changed in 500 years, but the sound was very much different. Today we ask a lot of volume from the violin, a lot of strength, a lot of power. In those days people were looking more for sound color and sound quality. So it was good. They were going for a different kind of sound and therefore used different kind of strings. The strings used in those days were made of gut, and today they're made of metal and perlon and other modern materials.
How do you bring an instrument back? How do you bring it back to life, or bring it back to the sound that it once created?
I have to observe the instrument carefully to understand how it can best sound. And in case of instruments that are this old, I observe how the instrument will produce the best possible sound, which means substituting the neck, for instance, which is not anymore under an angle as it is on modern instrument, but it's set straight onto the instrument. Substituting the fingerboard with the wedge form fingerboard, and also the bridge. I don't put a modern bridge on the violin anymore. I put a baroque bridge on it, which I make completely by hand from a little piece of wood like you see here.
Tell me about your workshop, and not only about what you do here, but how it makes you feel to be in this place working.
Spending my days in my workshop is one of the most beautiful things I can do in life. And therefore I have changed my workshop into the place that I want it really to be. So everything is there where I want it to be, and if I look around I see the things that I want to see. There's nothing disturbing. That is how my workshop is today. In previous years I used to have many assistants. I used to have students assisting me in the work in the workshop, and the activity was much more chaotic. Now it's a little bit more concentrated on just one or two important instruments, and that is what I especially like now after 50 years of labor.
How many hours and days and weeks will you spend making one violin?
Well, if I would have to make one violin and just that violin, it would probably take me about a month or a month and a half. We make long days. I normally start quite early in the morning and I just work on until my wife says that dinner is ready, and that's about the time when I stop working. And on Sundays it's the ideal moment of doing some extra work that I didn't get done during the week. So I like working 7 days a week. It's the most relaxing activity I actually have. So, but But the work, the making of an instrument is always interrupted by many other things. So many adjustments of other instruments, musicians coming in. So it normally takes me about a year or a year and a half to finally make and finish an instrument.
Wow. Your children, have your children, what do they think of Dad, the violin maker, and what do they think of the violin? And yeah, I'm sure you've tried to share your love of the instrument with your daughters and now a grandchild. How has that gone?
Well, sharing the love that I have in making violins, and actually the love for music most of all, is very difficult to share with other people, because for me it's almost like a fanatic activity. You know, it's completely absorbing me 100%, and I prefer after dinner, you know, to go back to the workshop and do some extra work and get things done. Now that obviously doesn't give the wish to my daughters to do the same job, because working day and night and 7 days a week isn't the first thing somebody wants to do when he's 15 or 20. But they obviously love the work that I'm doing. They love music, and we share a lot of beautiful concerts and things, but they're dedicating their life to completely different things. My first daughter is a photographer, and my second daughter is working for a big fashion company.
When you hear the violin played, whether you hear it on your stereo, or whether you go to a concert, or whether you hear it here in your workshop or in your house, how does that make you feel? What does that do to you emotionally to hear it?
Well, music is one of those things that goes right above anything else. It's first of all, it's an international language. We all speak that language. We all understand music. We can listen to music whether I'm in Europe, in the US, or in Asia, or wherever. It's the same. It's just one language that we all speak, and that makes it something very special. And above that, it's something that is there undeniably, but you can't see it. And when it's over, it's gone, and there's nothing left, only the memory of it. And that makes it very special too.
Does the violin and the music sound different in Cremona than it would anywhere else in the world, because this is the birthplace of the violin?
Well, the air in Cremona does actually add something to it. I've had that often, that musicians came to Cremona and playing their own violin, they said, well, my violin sounds a lot better here. Maybe it just feels like it's home or something like that. And that has to do with the atmosphere, you know, the climate and everything. We know how a wine tastes from one city to the other, from one country to the other. Actually, you should always taste the wine of the place you are in. That's the very best way to get to know that wine and to appreciate it.
If you finish this statement, the violin to Cremona is...
Okay. Well, if I think of the violin, and not only me, any musician in the world thinks of, plays the violin or listens to a violin, he knows that Cremona is the very second name that comes after violin. Cremona is where the violin was born 500 years ago, and it has been made for 500 years since then. And still today, Cremona is the capital of violin making. So any great musician, any great instrument, sooner or later will pass by Cremona. And then if you think of the great instruments like Stradivari, which are very beautiful to look at, and they're very well made, and the man has become very famous. He's had a very long working life. He died when he was 93, and he worked until his last day. But when you listen to the sound of a Stradivari, or you have the opportunity to play it, then you realize that that violin raises you to a higher level. It makes you play a lot better, and it makes any music a lot better. It is like a hand coming down from heaven, helping the musician to be a greater musician than he normally would be.
I seem to recall you telling us 20 years ago that a violin may sound better with age. Do I have that factually correct? Maybe you could tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the interesting thing of the violin is also there are many details of the violin that make it a very special instrument. Already the fact that we can still play the instruments that were made 500 years ago and they still are very satisfying the musicians. You know, if you think of any other musical instrument, it is not like that. But the violin has some very special aspects that make it really extraordinary. And most of all, time improves the sound production of a violin. If an instrument has been played well and carefully for a long time, the wood will get used to vibrating, to resonating properly, and it will continue sounding better and better and better over time. That is another very interesting thing. A violin never gets tired of producing music. It will only improve.
So, and I think I remember what you were talking about too. And so Stradivari, or you, or any violin maker may not hear the best version of.
I don't think Antonio Stradivari has ever heard the sound of his instruments as we hear it today. Stradivari violin, now 300 years later, sounds probably much better than it used to be in his days. We are also asking a lot more from a violin because we play concerts in front of an audience of 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people, and even on the last row of the big, huge concert hall, people want to hear every single note of the music that has been played. So we ask a lot more from the instrument, but the Stradivari violins do give that. They have the capability of producing that much.